Hello, and welcome to the start of the weekend. It's Friday, the 12th of September, 9 p.m. UK time, and you're here with the Actual Magician's Bookshelf. My name's Marcus, and we are going to be spending an hour discussing tarot, doing some sample readings. Hello, Sherry. Hello, Birds. Hello, Apox. Hello, Tracy. Everyone joining us. Hello, Bill. Hello. So, we're just going to have a general chat this evening about all things esoteric, all things tarot. I'm going to be doing some sample readings. I picked up this deck from my box downstairs. This is called the Forder Tarot, so I might be using that to do some these are more emotional. They're very nostalgic. Totes Emosh sort of deck. I'll tell you a little bit about that deck as well. I'm not affiliated with the artist designer. I just fell in love with the deck. And there's a few other things about that deck that are quite interesting as well. So we'll probably take a look at that. Hello and welcome to Tony. Tony will be moderating our chat. What else? This is actually from last week. I haven't moved this table since last week. Just wondering about the focus of the camera there. That should be in focus. Let me just there we go. The audio of some of the pre-recorded videos. I think what I've done is I have been working on the boot camp with YouTube, and they've been encouraging me to do all sorts of things. Hello, welcome back, Tony. Tony will be moderating the chat for us. Not that we need moderating, we're all very well behaved here, generally. So, I think what I did was I was messing around with dual streaming options like vertical screen and horizontal and flipping between them. I was way out of my depth with it. And I think what I've done is I pulled down the decibel level on my audio tracks within Premiere Pro, which is the software I use for doing all of the editing, taking out all of the sounds, all of the plosives and so forth. And you can see I've been busy doing a few other things this last week, so I've not even moved the table here. So I think that's what I've done. I need to check the audio recordings, which for the Anatheon course come from my mobile phone at 4K, and I think there's maybe the two last lessons in the members only area of the Anatheon. I need to check the original audio recording and compare it to the output, the exported post-edited version. If that is the problem, that will be great, because what I can do is up the decibel level in the editing software, re-export the whole thing with a better quality of audio, and hopefully replace. Hello, Marie. Hello, welcome. Marie's got a red hat, so that's great. Thank you for being a member, and thank you to our green hats and gold hats as well. There is a Fable black hat at the end of a year that is set up, and a few badged hats beyond that. So we'll see how we do with the hat situation. So if that's the case, hopefully I can re-export the videos, and then I can replace them. I've not checked that I can just simply replace the video without re-uploading it and putting a new link to it and doing all of that stuff, but I'm going to check that next week. So let's get rid of these cards. what was the word we learnt last week on the back here? Asemic. Yeah, so asemic having no necessarily ascribed meaning, and that was with these Innerscription oracle cards that we used last week. I don't know if Tony wants to share with us if there was any progress on the subject that we did for that reading. You don't have to by a long way. These are just demo readings, so obviously they're personal. Although this is a public broadcast. Hello V, hello. Yeah, so again, I've not got any particular plan for this evening. These live sessions are unstructured. They are unplugged, as we say. I have just uploaded the 7th video in the... Okay, so it's still unsure. Okay. Yeah, so I have uploaded the 7th Anetheon video, and then we have 3 final Anetheon videos for members only in the members section. And then I'm going to perhaps take a brief break from those, and for members do some more specialist videos, more, what's the word? I guess specific videos, more in-depth videos about some of the more esoteric subjects that I think are important in the general context of esotericism, just looking at it from the practical point of view, from the psychological point of view, from our mental health, from our spiritual development, and from the academic point of view as well. There are certain things that are, I think, really essential to understand. I've seen so many people make so many mistakes, including myself, over the last 45 years, that I think I am reasonably in a position, at least in some ways, to offer some guidance, I guess, about things that I've seen people go down dead long avenues, down to complete dead ends, and then have to either get stuck down there or completely come back on themselves and unlearn a lot of things. And so I want this channel to be able to set the foundations for a better study of Western esotericism. The deck to the left of the wand, Tony is asking about. Oh, well, it's nice you asked that. This is the Jolanda Tarot. And it was actually Charlotte that made me the groovy crocheted cover holder for this, with the pearl button there and the purple, because that goes with the sort of colour scheme of the deck. So it's a handmade little special thing. So that goes round a couple of times. Then I think it's supposed to go round there. So it just fits this little, it fits the style of it. Hello, Nerdy Rodent. Hello, Nerdy Rodent. I love the avatar that you have, Nerdy Rodent. It's a nice one. Yeah, so it's just, I like when the box fits the style of the deck. So this deck, I've got some photos of this deck before I deboarded it. This is a deboarded deck. So the backs actually worked out quite well because it wasn't designed to be deboarded, I guess. Those are the backs of some of the cards there. But this is such a popping deck, and it had these big, horrible purple borders around it, absolutely horrendous purple borders around it. So it took a while before I got round to doing it, but so that I could start using them and carry them around without wincing every time I looked at them. So this is the Jolanda Tarot. It's a very peculiar tarot It's a very whimsical tarot deck, but I do like using it for readings when I'm out and about. It's one of my travelling decks. It has white borders now. I don't know if that's any better, because the borders were massive. So I just like having it just the image, and when it's on the table, it really sort of pops out and helps tell the narrative between the there's a nerdy rodent. Just wondering about the focusing on the camera there. Yeah, so that's the Jolanda Tarot. But I do love it when a deck has a pouch or a box or a card box or a design feature to the box itself that sort of fits the character. It's a bit like when someone just wears clothes that suit them, that bring out something in their personality and stuff and display their personality. I think that's what I like about the boxes for things. So my Waite-Smith, obviously that's the handmade box I talked about last time. Yes, you're in there, nerdy rodent. That just suits my Waite-Smith deck down to the ground because it was designed for it. Yeah, and this deck here, the Forder deck by an artist in the Philippines called Josh, and this they gave me this bag to go with it. I can't remember if I bought it. I think I bought it to go with it, and again, it's just nice. The style fits and the fact it's just a drawstring pouch rather than a big tin box or something like that. Just suits this deck. Now, what I like about this deck, and again, we might use bandanas, blue silk shirt. There's all sorts of things. I mean, my original deck, I used a bag, an old burlap canvasy type bag that held coffee beans in it, and I just thought that was very stylish. So, yeah. The Aquarian deck, the new one, the smaller version one, the Palladini deck, that's quite a nice little tin as well. This is really good for carrying around because it doesn't damage the cards too much. So, so this was by somebody called Josh, and what I liked about this they had several decks, and I was laughing with them because when they were showing me them, one of their decks, I can't remember which one it's called, the Forder Tarot itself, this is the Midnight Musing Tarot, but the Forder Tarot itself is a Gen Z tarot, and they had an Ansabi Oracle, which was also a Gen Z Oracle deck. And so I was joking that I had no understanding of what a lot of the Gen Z terms were that they'd used in the deck. But it shows, again, I think, that some of the folk in the Philippines are way ahead of the curve in terms of design, engagement, to some extent understanding of tarot and its history, its art, and they're very progressive. Some of the folk I've met out in the Philippines in terms of developing tarot, playing with it, experimenting with it, and so it was no surprise that there was this specific Gen Z deck. But this deck I liked because Josh had created a playlist to go along with each of the cards, and I'm generally a visual person. I don't know about the actual magicians we have in the group, whether you would consider yourself visual or auditory, kinesthetic with feeling. What is your main way of engaging with the world, your default way? Quite often people who are auditory have a bit of difficulty visualizing things until you tell them to imagine them with sound. And then things like the inner guide meditation become a lot easier to do. But I tend to be very visual. But one thing I've found over the years is quite often when people change their state, their main way of representing the world changes as well, very significantly. You can perhaps observe this in other people. It's usually easier to observe it in other people than yourself. If someone is quite visual, and in NLP terms would say, oh, I'm a very visual person, if they panic, if they're frightened, if they regress to a younger state because of dealing with authority or any big significant shift in their state or their situation, even like if they get drunk or something like that, some other form of state change, you'll notice that their representation system quite often changes. That is to say, someone who is quite visual, when they're drunk, might get very kinesthetic, might not notice things visually very much, but might be very kinesthetic just in terms of touching things, holding things, enjoying the warmth of something or the coolness of something, because their main representation system shifts. This is how we know that they've changed state. Quite often when I've been doing more therapeutic work with people and we've established maybe their lead system is auditory, quite often when they go into a deep trance, a deep state of hypnosis or a deep state of focus, whatever nature their trance might be, particularly if they're going into their problem state, quite often they shift representation altogether. Suddenly an audio person becomes a very visual person, or a visual person starts to tell you about the voices that they're hearing, the droning sound that goes on that drags them down, and they talk about being dragged down, and they get very kinesthetic, very feeling in their language, even though 5 minutes before, when they were telling you about their journey to the session, they'll say, oh, well, I saw this new shop had opened and I saw there was a really nice dress in the window and it was really pretty. I felt it was really summery because it had blue flowers on it and so on. And they'll be very visual, but in a altered state, when they're talking about maybe something that happened in their childhood or a phobia, something like that, they'll be, oh, I feel chill to my bone, I feel cold all over, I'm getting goosebumps, and so on. And they'll be really kinesthetic or really audio. And it's just something to notice if you want to observe your own state, but it's also easier to observe it in other people. So anyhow, coming back to this deck, it's visual, of course, it's a visual design, but each of the cards, and this is more of an oracle deck than a tarot, has a playlist for it. So each of the cards has a playlist, and I've not listened to all of these songs, I have to be honest, but I have started to, because obviously there's some Taylor Swift in there and things that I am, even not being a Gen Zer, familiar with. I'm not entirely out of the loop, but yeah, so it's just quite nice to have a playlist by the artist of the music that they were listening to that inspired the feeling of the card, or once they design the card, this is the music that they feel goes with it. So I think that's quite cute. So this is the Midnight Musings deck. So does anyone have a question that we can look at? And I'll use these cards and then we can mention which songs go with them, perhaps. And we won't listen to those live, but we'll have those as a reference. So, Nerdy Rodent, Digital Alchemist, I have an urge to create my own deck. Well, we now have the tools at our disposal for most people to be able to create your own deck. Obviously, the best thing to do is find your own voice, but also appreciate, to me at least, it's important to appreciate the structure, the actual structure of tarot. And it doesn't matter whether you go astrological, whether you go Kabbalistic, whether you go intuitive, artistically in telling a narrative, as long as you stick to one structure. There are some decks where it's very obvious that the person has not really grasped like the structure of tarot, and as a reader that becomes very obvious because some of the cards seem like they've come from a different deck, or you might get a whole suit that feels like it's not based on the same principles that the other three suits are. And for a tarot reader, I think it's very important to be consistent so that the deck is congruent and comprehensive in its structure. But within that, then the trick is to find your own voice. So, for example, Ninky van Sewal with this deck has found her voice with asemic symbolism. And one of my favourite oracle decks, Der S, it's basic stonework in a sense. And oracle decks, I think, are even more difficult to get the structure right. Yeah, so I have done a cyberpunk deck myself. This is the Cyberpunk Lenormand. So this is a Lenormand structure, but based on sort of cyberpunk art, just because AI generation, certainly when I was doing this, was more suited to a cyberpunk style, and because I'm a fan of Gibson's work and all of the other authors within the sort of cyberpunk genre, I felt that would be the best way for me to approach it. And also because I was cocking a hoop, as they say, at all of the traditionalists, so-called traditionalists within Lenormand, that between UI and the people here in the live do not know what they're talking about at all, even though they state that they're authorities, but they weren't authorities about 5 years ago in some cases. So I wanted to make a really futuristic Lenormand deck to stretch the boundary of Lenormand out of its so-called tradition. So I felt cyberpunk would be a nice way of doing that, and it fitted the artwork. So Marie, so we've got a Red Hat magician asking a question, so you definitely get a reading. And let's take a look at this deck. This deck may be suitable. If not, then we'll use one of the other decks. Sherry's just asking a question. If you do a reading with one deck, is that reading only for that one deck? Can you use the same question with another deck for more info, or should you pull other cards within that deck that you've used to get more info? That's a really cool question. I look at this as a bit of a toolbox, and so most decks can do most sort of readings. That's just the general nature of the tool. However, certain decks are what I call in Tarosophy attuned to certain sorts of readings. So the Thoth deck is very well attuned to, for example, educational readings, like should I go to college, should I take this course, should I take an apprenticeship, or should I take a longer course of study? Because it's related to Thoth, I think that's one of the reasons. It's not the only one, but Crowley really wanted it for educated university people and the art world to appreciate his Thelemic philosophy. So the deck, as a result, in contemporary use, has a side effect from Crowley's intent in publishing it, is that it's damn fine for education readings. And so I say that deck is attuned for that. And certain decks are attuned for certain methods. And in Tarosophy and Tarosophy Squared, I developed that a little bit further and show that some decks are attuned. I've developed methods, not just a spread, but a different way of reading that is attuned to that deck. How do I know what the decks are attuned for? Experience, and I think it's helpful when the artist or designer has specifically attuned it. Their intent, their background and things like that. But generally speaking, it's just through long-term use. Certain decks just become attuned to certain things. Strangely enough, the Waite-Smith Tarot is very attuned to reading for younger people. Although I was just thinking, the Hanson Roberts, for example, that's really attuned not just for younger people, but if I'm doing any method where I'm using a metaphor or a folklore, fairy tale, in the method itself, for example, getting the client to visualize their life as a fairy tale, then the Hanson Roberts is really good for that. So quite often you can just stumble upon a question, a deck, and the method you're using all being attuned like three tuning forks, and they all resonate into a perfect harmony. But I think in Tarosophy Squared, I also talk about using A-tuned decks. I can't remember what I called them now, non-tuned or anti-tuned decks. For example, my ex-wife uses the Gummy Bear Tarot for really, really deep, profound spiritual readings. And in her hands, it's just a masterclass in reading, because the Gummy Bear Tarot, and she uses the illegal one, the pirated version that I think was produced a long time ago now, and then got banned because they hadn't got the license from whoever produces the sweets or the Gummy Bear range. And sometimes you can use the Thoth deck for a really light-hearted reading, like should I spend money on a pair of trousers or a pair of shoes? And that can be quite fun and enlightening as well. So, yeah. Now, in terms of going back to the original question, I will usually use 2 decks in practice, generally. I will use one deck for the reading and then have another deck, sometimes an oracle deck, but sometimes it might be a other tarot deck, as a potential backup, as a potential way of keying insight into the other deck. Because when you read with one deck, you are bound to that system. And in terms of your cognitive process, you're working within a particular system. It's like you've got that framework, you're looking out of that window. But when you then use another deck, it does something different to the way you're looking at the first deck. And it's like going outside and looking through the window in another way, or looking out through another window that's pointed at a different direction. And it just allows you a bit of cognitive dissonance in between the two systems, from which meaning can then arise, from which sometimes out of the box thinking, something will suddenly snap into your mind that is in the original reading, but unlocked by the extra cards from the second deck. I don't often, although sometimes I do, a Celtic Cross, for example, with the Waitsmith deck, and there might be a card, say, in the past, and we might have been talking about that, and in the course of the reading and the discussion thereafter with the client, it may be that they've said something that I want to find out a bit more information while I have them there with me and while the cards are on the table, and then I might lay out, I'll just draw two cards and I'll lay them against the past position to get more input out of that position, out of that single card. And I won't do 3 cards or 4 cards. It's usually 1 or 2 cards, more often than not 2 cards, because that gives me some sort of narrative structure in between the 2 cards, if that makes sense. Sometimes I'll draw just 1 extra card, but not usually. But generally speaking, I guess what I'm saying is that I will do a main reading and then I'll do a side reading. Sometimes I will do a single card from the Philosopher's Stone. Sometimes I'll do a clarification of a 3-card reading from the Psi cards, just to make sure that we have a good summation for the I think Bill's, again, very succinctly, I keep reading Bill's name on the chat window as Bill Succincts rather than Skulls. But yeah, experiment is the succinct thing that I'm saying. Hopefully I'm giving some examples of the way I do it, so things to experiment with for yourself. Right, so in terms of a meta tarot, there are ways, and again, I've looked at this in Tarosophy and Tarosophy Squared, a couple of books that I wrote on tarot, and there's a whole branch of what's called meta magic, and different people have different descriptions of what that is, but to me, it's sometimes I will do an act of magic with a tarot deck based on something that happens in some synchronicity with something I've seen on television, and I will tie that back to the tarot deck, and then I will sometimes ask the tarot which other tarot deck to use and what to do with it. So sometimes I will design a tarot ritual based on 3 tarot cards that then the ritual is actually using a different deck. So do experiment with that sort of thing as well. I did go through a phase when I was in my teens of quite often doing a tarot card reading, and as I was getting into the I Ching at the time, I would ask the I Ching to comment on the tarot card reading, and quite often the I Ching would give me a particular trigram or a particular hexagram or a particular line, a moving line that would say the oracle is silent, or you should not approach the king twice, I think, is out of memory. And it shows how many times I would have had that, because I can remember the line about, and something like either the fox gets his tail wet in the river, or you should not approach the king twice. That was quite often the default answers that the I Ching gave me for many, many years, until I sort of recognised that I shouldn't be doing things that would end up with my tail wet. Or I think the I Ching was a little bit ahead of itself. But let's do this reading for Marie with this deck. So the fate would be of moving permanently abroad. So I'm not that familiar with this deck, but because we've done some heady stuff over the last few sessions, I thought we'd do something slightly more. Although actually we did do that quite intuitive reading with the asemic symbols, didn't we, last week? I felt in the mood for something different. Needed a long shuffle for some reason. I was visualising, whilst I was shuffling, I was visualising Marie. I had like her name travelling, moving, like going over an ocean, like in one of those montage scenes or linking scenes on a old adventure movie where you get the dotted lines and the airplane travelling from one place to another. So the first card is reassurance. It's fine by me. Notice the way that card is drawn. Beautiful, beautiful artwork. Very delicate artwork. So it's fine by me. I remember I'm often driving my son to school, and it would take just under 2 hours because he was going to a very particular school, and I was driving to work, which was a couple of hours away every single day. So I would drop him off most days and pick him up again. And so we had like 4 hours in a car with nothing to do other than to talk to each other or listen to music or just look out the window. And so I used the opportunity to really train him in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, because I felt that would be a useful thing for him to understand as he grew up. I think he was maybe, 13, 14 at the time. And I remember just after that period, I'd almost forgotten about it, and he'd then moved school, gone to university and stuff. And we attended a funeral at a particular point, and I asked him afterwards how he'd felt about it, how what he'd noticed about it, what his whole feeling about it was. And one of the first things he said to me was, I noticed how much self-comforting was going on. I said, what do you mean? And he said, people holding their own bodies, people holding their own hands, like on their knees, or and yeah, he'd noticed, he'd really picked up on this sort of human feeling of self-comforting, of just holding yourself close, particularly in a time of change or grief in this case. So, and this has that beautiful self-comforting nature to it, very strong, reassuring nature. So I'd say from the first card at least, that is a good answer, I would guess, for Marie, that it's fine by me is like literally what the card is saying. But you may have to provide your own reassurance. It's a reassurance. Now, I was just going to take a look at the song that goes with that, because if I give you the playlist, Marie, then you can listen to the song, and the song may have far more of the answer in it for you. So, reassurance. So, the song for reassurance is Deep Diving by No Rome. Okay, so for reassurance, listen to Deep Diving by No Rome. Make sense, Marie? Deep Diving by No Rome. And there's a thing about song lyrics that I'll share with you that I've noticed over the years, and from NLP and from hypnotherapy. You know when someone has, and you probably had this happen yourself, a song lyric stuck in your head, and you keep repeating that line or humming it out loud? Quite often, thank you, Marie, quite often, go back and look at the song lyrics, which is a lot easier to do nowadays than when I first started doing this sort of thing, and look at the line before, the line immediately before the line that's stuck in your head. More often than not, that line will be the one with the message for you. Because what happens, I think I've observed over the years, for myself and a lot of other people, and sometimes people just gasp when this is pointed out to them, and they check the line, and I've seen some people burst into tears and stuff, because quite often your unconscious recognizes a line in a song as meaningful to you, but because you're not either ready to hear it, or because you're not concentrating, because you're not open to that message, what tends to happen is your conscious mind picks up on the unconscious response, but by the time it's done that, the song has moved on one line, usually one line. And so you find yourself humming a line ba, 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 from a song, but it actually, your unconscious has flagged that, or your conscious has flagged that because of your unconscious response to the line before. So if you listen to Deep Diving by No Rome, it's interesting, it's No Rome, there's a pun on no roaming, I guess. And you find a certain line stuck in your head, then have a look at the line that comes before that. So let's do the rest of this reading then. Do 3 cards. Cozy. It's old news, but I miss you. So maybe there's something in that. Notice how the gesture of the figure is both protective and sad. It's covering the person's mouth, as if they can't express to somebody how they're feeling. So could it be that you will miss certain things, even though you're cozy in that new situation? So there's reassurance and there's cozy. Let's find the song that goes with cozy. But these are very homely images, very homely keywords, reassurance and cozy. So it's not answering the question, should you move, but more, how will it feel? What the effect would be of moving. So you're going to need to find your own reassurance, but despite you missing things, you will feel cozy or can become cozy. That's the effect of moving permanently abroad. And just taking a look at the song for cozy is Sweatshirt by Patrick Hyson or Heson. I don't know what Eugene means in that context. Maybe that's the group. But cozy, the music to listen to is Sweatshirt by Patrick Hyson. And Marie, what I'd ask you to do as well is, and this is just an intuitive thing, is listen to the first song, then immediately queue up the second song. So find them on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you have access to find those two songs. And the third song from the third card, which we'll pull in a second, we'll put here, and listen to all three songs one after the other as a narrative, as a songscape, as a soundscape, okay? And then the third card, Fate. And that's Filipino at the bottom. So I might have to put that into a translator. But Fate. And we can see as well, can you see how the lines are moving through the cards? There's a sort of this growth here, but then there's a sort of movement and an opening, and the cloud leaving here from the blue flowering here. There's a sort of gentle shift, a drift almost. So even though you're looking back from here, it's like you can see, once you're there, you can see how you're fated to have got there. There's more of a clarity and more of a line when you're looking back than here, or even when you're there, that it's clearer in retrospect, I think, is one of the effects of the move. And if we take a look at the third song for that card, where have we got? Fate. Fate. Oh, yes, I have listened to that one. It's a bit not quite hip hop. It's like contemporary hip hop. So the third song is Tadana by Up Dharma Down. So Fate, Tadana by Up Dharma Down. Of course, this is a Buddhist concept of Dharma, which is to do with fate, or it's a sort of tunomancy, audiomancy, songomancy. I have, and again, this is in Teosophy, done living oracles with people and told them that they have to leave the tarot reading and listen for the first song that they hear, and that song will have a message for them, because that sounds like a bit of a loose idea in terms of divination, but it's a really ancient way of doing it. There are even invocations, and I don't know where this is published. I think it's in the witchcraft course on Magicka School, that I have a method I quite often use myself, which is an invocation to Hecate, and then basically, if you hear a dog, first, it's if you hear barking first, it's a yes. If you hear birds first, it's a no. And if you hear the sound of wind or weather first, then it's a could be either, maybe, I'm not ready to answer at this time. And it's actually a very old verse, and it's a very old form of divination. And it's quite fun to practice, because nowadays you can literally say, if you suddenly find yourself switching on the car radio or walking into a shop or an elevator that's playing a song, or someone walks by you and they have a music playing loud, or a ringtone on a phone rings or something, that will be the message for you if you go and listen. And this literally turns the world into a living oracle. And quite often, if you go into that state of feeling and living the world as a living oracle, quite often you will have an amazing surprise. In fact, I'd like you all to try this over the weekend. Just keep an eye out, a vague awareness, a background process, waiting for the universe to deliver you a message. And you'll be stuck in a queue behind someone, and you'll take a step back and you'll see on the back of their sweatshirt a huge message in capitals for you. And you'll know it because you'll laugh out loud at the sheer obvious ridiculousness of the message and the manner in which it's delivered. Because I can assure you, if my 45 years of occultism have not taught me anything, it has taught me that the universe has a sense of humour. So, just see if the universe can provide you a living oracle over the weekend, and then we can reconvene next week and you can share what the message is. Bill's pointing out an interesting thing in the group chat, which is that sometimes, I don't know the context that Bill's providing his client, that when they heard police, ambulance sirens, related it as trumpets of angels. Sometimes we have to be careful that we don't over-interpret things, that the universe has a message for us to go and rob a bank or something along those lines, or that we are the chosen one and we should, like one of Aleister Crowley's students did, pray to Acha, Charles Stanfield Jones, suddenly strip off all of his clothes in Canada and run through the streets yelling, "I have thrown off the veils of illusion." So, he just got arrested, basically. So, Meddling Sheep, Red Hat Meddling Sheep. The books I've written, I was amazed at the number. Off the top of your head, how many books have you published? Well, we originally started with the idea, Tali Goodwin and I started with the idea that we wanted a shelf. Basically, instead of just having one book, that we wanted a shelf, just a small shelf, like a IKEA box shelf of books. And I had joked with Llewellyn when we first approached them, and we were talking with our agent, with Llewellyn. I said, would Llewellyn be scared if I sent them a list of 78 books I've got to write, each of which hasn't been written before? It's not a repeat of another idea. They're all unique ideas, and there's 78 books, and I think I've got time to write them. And would they be willing to give me a 78-book contract? And she just laughed and rolled her eyes and said, no, they're not going to do that. So we've done, 4 or 5 books for Llewellyn so far. The Spiritual Key to the Tarot broke us both, really. That it's been 10 years of work in the Spiritual Key to the Tarot. Some books I've written quite quickly. Terosophy took 3 weeks to write because that was my first book, and I just had so much in my head that I wanted to put on paper, so it didn't take much thought. It took a lot of editing, although the publisher let me down big time. They didn't let me down with the editing. He was actually a very good editor and made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of edits to it. And we worked on it for quite a while after I'd written it. So that was 3 weeks of solid writing. And it was, like most books, about 80,000, 100,000. A lot of our books tend to be a bit longer than other books. They average at about 120,000 words. And I think I've co-authored or written about 58 books now, something like that. The plan is to get triple numbers, because once I get to 100 books, then I think I'm trying not to blow my own trumpet. I'm just literally this is just how it is, really. If I wrote 58 books and then ended up writing 70 books, then there doesn't feel much difference in those numbers. Whereas 100 books is very different to 78 books or 34 books. And that means that there's no way I've got time in my life now to write 1,000 books. So I'll have to be content at about 100. So, we are working at the moment. Charlotte Louise and I are mainly working on the Magister. That will be out quite soon, because we're just reorganising it, which has been a massive job. And reformatting it. Thank you. Thank you, Agatha, not Agatha. With Tali, we work differently on different books. Quite often, she does the research. For example, it's Tali who discovered the Trinic images in the British Museum. Tali who did all of the research for Meakin, the Golden Dawn Adept, in A New Dawn for Tarot, that book. Quite often, Tali will write some material and then I will slot it into something else. So she does a lot of fill-in work. So I'm like the public face of our stuff, and Tali's actually quite shy and works in the background and just gets on with it. For example, at the moment, Tali's working on the guidebook for the certificate course that starts on Sunday. So we have a tarot certificate course, our first revision of our certificate level for 10 years. And I'm intending that this will stand as our basic certification course for the next decade at least. So Tali's putting all of her familiarity with the Waite stuff that she worked on for a decade, for 10 years, reading all of Waite's work, really immersing herself, but now unfortunately she's having difficulties stepping it back down all the way to a simple, basic, accessible certificate course for absolute beginners, whilst having all of Waite's wordy spiritualism and sacramentalism inside her head. I found it relatively easy to switch that off because I was so glad to finish all of that. But because Tali was so immersed in it all for so long, she's basically trying to find a way out of the 1930s and esoteric Christian sacramentalism into the sort of YouTube, Facebook generation language for the course book. But she's hoping to have finished the majors tomorrow, so I can quickly write that up and have that as a handout for our first class on Sunday. So that'll be quite nice. It'll be a nice surprise for people. There'll be a little handout to go with the main presentation for the certificate course. So different collaborations work in different ways. Working with Charlotte Louise on the Magister, that's a far more, at the moment, editorial process. Charlotte writes very succinctly, very directly, and then I sort of slot that in and maybe move a few things around more as an editor than a collaborator. But that is, and it just works in different ways. For several of the books, Tali and I just sat opposite each other in a room with a desk in between us and a computer in front of each of us, just writing for like 3 hours, 4 hours, talking, coming back, doing that the next day and the day after and the day after and the day after, and until we'd finished. But yeah, so it sort of changes depending on the book and so forth. So was there another question before we close off? Yeah, excellent, Marie. You're going to be on a mission to listen to that music. An autobiography. I have mused about that because I've met some interesting people and they've told me some interesting things over time. So, some of, I guess, my early experience of witchcraft is being lost now with the modern craft revival. A lot of people are now making up stuff and revising stuff, but they weren't there like 40 years ago, and so on. So a lot of that history is being lost, I think, or forgotten or neglected. So that might be useful. I'm partly doing that with the Hedge Witch course in Magicka School, putting some of the original teachings back in the day, particularly some of the Gardnerian teachings that I had from my initiator in witchcraft, my high priest and high priestess, that came from Pat Crowther, came from Gardner, and a lot of that has been revised, recanted, neglected over the decades. So excellent. Yeah, we do not use ChatGPT at all for anything, even giving us ideas or prompts. I did use it, I was tempted to use it and experimented with it for restructuring, but it made such a mess of it. And also at this level of publication, we really can't risk and don't want to risk having mistakes introduced into our work by a tool. I think ChatGPT is a really, really excellent tool, but it's one that we are deliberately sticking clear of so that there can be no confusion, no... I've seen some people produce some stuff that I can recognise even sort of third hand that they've used ChatGPT in it, and if you cut and paste some of the text into ChatGPT checkers, it comes up with a fair likelihood. Now that doesn't mean that they have used it, unfortunately, because ChatGPT is modelled on all of our work anyway, so it will always be able to produce things that if we then carry on writing, ChatGPT will sound like it, and our work can be mistaken for ChatGPT. So to make sure there's no chance of that, we really do not use it for anything. I used it for coming up with made-up words. I found it useful for that because that's something that there's no danger of it replicating anything that anyone else has ever done, because then I can check the words like Anetheon, for example, that don't make sure that they don't exist, that it's not copying anyone. I'm using generative language in the way it's meant to be used. So that's our stance on ChatGPT. The course, the certificate course, right, I'll just mention that and then we'll close off. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope the reading's been useful. And also we've talked about different ways of doing divination using different sensors, in this case, audio and music. There are decks that you can associate with scents or stones and crystals and things, and then bring those into your divination as well. So the certificate course is going to be our standard basic certification for Terosophy certification. We are looking to introduce thank you for asking, Agatha. It's actually, I'd love to talk about it a little bit more. We can perhaps do that next week, because I'm really interested in it, and I've read quite a bit about it, and I'm following it with interest as well. And it does affect tarot and writing and publication and artwork, of course, as well. The certificate course is going to be our standard Terosophy certification. It's going to be required for people who will then may want to go on to become a certified trainer of Terosophy. So we have played around with this idea for years and years and years, probably over 25 years, of introducing a formal structure, a trainer's structure and things like that. But we don't want that to be a sort of a cash grab or some sort of pyramid scheme of training, all of the things that get associated with that. We want to do it naturally, authentically, and so that it's useful in providing that. There is going to be a Discord channel for the Crucible Club. Charlotte and I set up the channel for the Order of Everlasting Day first, just so we could test it out with the fewer people that are actually in our magical order. That has worked out quite well. We've learned what we needed to learn from that, and the Crucible Club is next APOC. So if anyone is following the Crucible Club stuff, very soon you'll get an invite to the channel on our server for the Crucible Club as well. Okay, everyone. Thanks a lot. I hope we've had a nice discussion this evening. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I don't know what you are planning. I've got a load of sorting out to do. I've got to sort out all of the decks that need to go out for the people who joined the YouTube channel as members. That is the next thing to do. It took me ages to get round to listing everyone for the certificate course, putting everyone's emails together. If you're watching this and you're on the certificate course for Sunday and you haven't received an invite, a welcome message, then get in touch with me. It's the Order of Everlasting Day. That is our super special secret magical order that we've been running for quite a few years now. There's only a few people in it, but that's where we do all of our more intense magical work and stuff like that. Tracy, if you send your address to me via marcus@celestialcanopy.com, that's what I'm just using to put people's addresses together. For people who are UK based, I'm sending those out. For people who are US based, Shay is sending those out. And hopefully between us, we'll be getting those out quite soon. I do have to order a few more because we overran with that offer. But I do want to make sure everyone gets a deck. So some people may have to wait a little bit longer. But I'm working on that over the weekend. So whatever you're doing over the weekend, have a great time. wonderful time. And we'll see you all next week. I might do a live over this coming week, but that will be an ad hoc thing sometime over the week. And there are now 7 lessons of the Anetheon in the members-only area. So if you're interested in watching those, you can watch all 7 of them now for your first month subscription. So have a great time, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. And as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop. Bye for now.